it had a side view of the Panama Canal. I got something they don't have anymore. Do you remember Indian paper? I put it down and I traced the Panama Canal, 8 pages. I turned it in, and so we were talking. Next day she said, Elmer, when we come back from recess, your paper was very interesting. Would you give a report on the Panama Canal? Yes, ma'am. And so I'm not going to go to recess. Everybody went to recess. And for the first time in my life, I cut recess. Oh, that's a good teacher. And so I did go to recess. And do you remember when they used to call those things on the board blackboards? Then they call them whiteboards and green boards and chalkboards. But to me, they are plain old. I took a piece of chalk in 2 great big sections, and I drew the Panama Canal. And I sat down just about the time recess was over. She said, what's this? I said, that's the Panama Canal. Give your report. The first time I ever spoke in public, I spoke on the Panama Canal. My first sermon was, I stood up, and for about 12 or 15 minutes, I was so full of my subject. I talked about the Panama Canal, how many cubic feet of dirt they moved. I talked about this. I talked about how many people died and where the hospitals were, and I was full of it. And I sat down, and she said, Elmer, that was wonderful. Oh, shucks. I had never had a teacher tell me before, that's wonderful. Well, you don't know what that does to you. That's a life-transforming moment. Now, let me prove to you something. Turn to the person next to them. Look deep into their sleepy eyes and say, you're wonderful.
You're wonderful, man. Y'all are wonderful. Y'all are wonderful.
I guess you're right.
Now, did you guys listen? Okay, so let me tell you. I said, wow, I like that. I like that attention. I like that attention. Wow, that's great. Elmer, I learned more from the Panama Canal from you than any other person I've ever met. Wow.
Soon as sign up with your email, and you'll get 3 e-newsletters a week. There'll be a blog update, and you'll get some new information. And these will be excerpts from some of our books, and you'll get a continual. Look like I've been doing a lot of running to you. Well, let me tell you what I see. As I look around the hall, I see some middle-aged men and women. Then it's been a while since you did some running as well. And the truth be told, back then and today, we get into our middle-aged years in life, we tend to not do a lot of running. Some people do, but it's actually kind of rare. It was rare back then. It is rare today. What this dad does is very rare, and what does it tell you about the dad? He's going crazy. He's going nuts because he lost something, and now he's finding it, and he's losing his mind. And he can't believe it. His son is coming home, and he's just going crazy. So he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, kissed him. We're going to change translations. Next slide here. I love the way the Message has this. The son started his speech. Father, I've sinned before God. I sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. Not hard to imagine where the rest of the speech went. There's the start of the speech. The rest of the speech, I know mom's upset. You're upset. Terrible thing I did. On and on and on. Next slide. But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to his servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And I think if Jesus were writing this story today, he would say, somebody hire a band. Call a caterer. Get some decorations going. Get us a professional photographer in here to capture this event. Because my son, who was lost, has now been found. And this is the point I want to leave with today. Next slide. It is impossible for us to love the Father except that our heart is going to become a little bit more like the Father, who's kind of crazy about lost people. He can think about everything all the time, but he doesn't. In his mind, in a way, and you know, the mystery of describing the mind of God, and just pray you'd be gracious with me on this. But in a way, God's mind is kind of focused in the same way that your mind gets focused when you lose something. And it is impossible for us to love the Father, God wants to do a lifelong work in our heart to make us a little more compassionate and a little more caring and a little more thoughtful and a little more eager to reach lost people. And as I've been doing conferencing for 14 years now, and the primary conference I do is called You Can Double a Class in 2 years or less. Simple fact of math is a group of 10 that doubles every 18 months will reach 1,000 people for God in 10 years. That's a simple fact of math. But the more I do this, the more I'm convinced that the real problem is not we can't figure out how to do that. The problem is, in many cases, we don't want to do that. I have had people literally come up to me and say to me, after I pointed out, a group of 10 that doubles every 18 months can reach 1,000 people for God in 10 years. And people come up to me afterwards, and they have said to me, I did the math, you're right, but I don't want to. We're comfortable the way we are. It just doesn't matter to us. And God wants to do a work in your heart and mind, all of your life, to make you a little more compassionate and a little more thoughtful and a little more prayerful and a little more eager and a little more focused as God's mind is focused about those who are far from Him. A lady came up to me, I did this talk in North Carolina one time, and a lady came up to me afterwards, and I can only imagine she did not understand what I was trying feebly to communicate, and clearly did not communicate very well in her case. Because she came up to me afterwards and she said, and the whole point was, how do you feel about lost people? How do you feel about them? You love them? I ask you a more difficult question. Do you even like them? I mean, is your heart just kind of drawn to reaching lost people? If you were to go through a stack of visitors cards of people who visited your church, who would you be more excited about calling? A lost person or a Baptist who moved to town from Alabama? See, God wants to do a work in your heart where when you see that person and it said, and maybe the card said, you found out or you called them or whatever, and it said, no church background. God wants to do a work in your heart where you see that and your heart just starts racing. And you think, here is a hot one, and this is a possibility, and this is a good one, and I'm gonna pay special attention to this. And I had other plans this Friday night, but I'm gonna cancel those plans on this Friday night and see if I can get this couple in my home this Friday night. And something in you just electrifies you to think about, we got to get focused. Anyway, I was trying to do this message to say North Carolina. And a lady came up to me afterwards. She said, you're darn right I don't like being around sinners. They smoke and they smell like they've been smoking. They drink and they act like they've been drinking. They swear and they're materialistic and they have terrible habits. And there are people in my church that are tempted by that kind of thing and they're allured by that kind of thing. And they have one foot in the world and one foot in the church. And I'm not that way. Look how godly I am. I don't even like lost people. And we think that we're going to solve this problem with a new Sunday school program. And I want to say, if you feel that way, if you resonate with that, I want to say you do not need a new Sunday school program. You need a new heart. You need a heart like God's heart, that it just matters to you. You care. It bothers you. And you may be good at confrontational evangelism, or like I am, not so good at it. But there's something in your heart that just cares about lost people. One last story. We're gonna let you go. My wife and I did